Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Tommy Williams Show episode. So we're moving right along. Pandemic is still in full effect, unfortunately. We're still getting lots of footage, lots of testimonies, and now tonight we're going to turn a corner and we're going to get some professional assistance from a psychologist who's been around for some time, and she's going to weigh in on her thoughts and what's going on her end with regard to helping people with mental health. But first, we're going to have a guest named Shannon, and Shannon is coming to us from Michigan, and Shannon is going to be discussing her relationship with COVID as it is. And I say that as it is because she is what's known as a long hauler. So she's going to define that for us. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Shannon aboard. Shannon, come on in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Shannon, so from what I understand, things are starting to pick up out there in Michigan with COVID and the numbers. You want to tell us a little something about that?
Well, it's pretty much been, it was kind of at a height here. I would guess just before Thanksgiving kind of peaked, it seemed like. And, you know, people were really quarantining and not grouping families together and having the conversations before the holidays so that you could really converse in a comfortable way, because maybe some members of the family aren't as concerned if they're in a mask, and others are, you know, more at risk, like older parents. So the numbers are getting better now. We seem to be opening up a little bit around here. So
good. So are schools opened up? Have they been opened up all the while?
Public schools just recently started to allow that again.
Okay. Well, with schools, did they have options? Like, I know they have the like online students, and then the parents would have the option and things. Did they have an option, the parents out there?
We have a 15-year-old daughter, and you could opt them in, you know, class in school 2 or 3 times a week, and then online at home. We didn't choose that option because we just weren't sure, and there were still some, you know, some instances of COVID in the high school, so we had chose just to keep her completely at home and online this year. So
I know a lot of people have taken that option. It seems like, you know, the optimum choice, it would seem, you know, because you're safe, most precious assets, and you know,
absolutely,
that's it. So so good for you, and I'm glad everybody's safe. But I do know that there was a time that we spoke about when things weren't so safe, and COVID had actually entered your home, and it hit multiple people. What happened?
Well, you know, the virus was so rampant here that people talk a lot about contact tracing. Where somebody contacts you, if you've been in contact with somebody that's positive, and they just couldn't keep up with those numbers. So we are not sure who got it first, who brought it in first, or anything, because it seemed like my sister just moved here recently from another state, well, a year ago. And so she's still getting established. So right now, you know, I'm taking her to work, and my mother brings her home from work. And so I think that's where it started, I think, with my sister. My sister started feeling pretty tired and run down. And then the next thing you know, I got hit with a cough the first part of November. When I say I got hit with a cough, I started feeling a little fatigued. It was a late night for me at work. I decided to go outside and maybe get some fresh air and walk around a little bit because I was just tired. And in the middle of that, I started coughing, like right now. And I texted, or I told my boss, I said, I think I'm going to go home. I'm coughing, and about 2 hours later, I texted my boss and I said, I don't think I should come in tomorrow. I can't shake the cough. I don't think it's from cool air. And she said, oh, you need to get tested.
Wow.
And I said, really? I don't have any fevers. I don't, you struggle with it because I know that I've been contained, and I know that my stepdaughter's been home, and I know all of these things and the mask and everything, but I'm glad she did, because it took 10 days to get my result back, but I tested positive. My husband tested positive, and both of my parents tested positive within that week.
What a short timeline. So tell me this, when at your workplace, did they have any type of testing, or just like before you come in each day, was there any type of assessment as to see,
Absolutely.
Are you okay? Temperature or anything like that?
There's multiple thermometers everywhere in every department. And then there's a sheet of paper every morning, kind of a how are you? Have you had any of these symptoms? And there's like 10 different things. And, I came to work and I had no fever. And when I left, it was because I started coughing. And there was nothing in between that made me go, ooh, and it was a Friday. So then trying to find some place to test on a Friday evening was a nightmare. So they're very cautious, lots of masks, sanitizing equipment, a professional company that comes in not only to clean, but once a week does a very special, thorough, specialized cleaning for COVID prevention. I mean, just you name it, everything was in place to prevent it.
Wow. So all the common practices took place, but you were asymptomatic, and because of that, you just had a cough, which could be a common cough, and then you left. And then you mentioned Friday was a lot of places were closed. Was that Friday were you seeking out a test to just make sure, or to check and see if you were positive? Is that what was happening?
The doctor's offices stopped taking phone calls at 4:30. If you could even get someone to answer a phone at that time. Early November was a nightmare around here. I remember being on hold for a phone call to my husband's doctor's office for 3 hours. And somebody answered the phone after 3 hours and couldn't hear me, and she hung up, and I just started to cry.
Wow.
And they're telling you, don't come to the doctor's office. If you can't breathe, go to the ER. And I'm going, I just need to know how to get a test.
Isn't that
something? Then I started going through Rite Aid and CVS on my phone, and all of the slots were full. So then a lot of places locally required a doctor to prescribe the test. Well, the doctor's offices are closed, and then you can't get through. So it was a very frustrating, what do I do and where do I go,
Yeah.
So I ended up driving about 45 minutes north to a local hospital that I made a phone call and was able to check off my symptoms, and they flagged me and said, okay, come in and get tested. And I made an appointment, and then it was 10 days from there that I actually saw that I was positive, but by then I knew I was.
Wow. So when you had gone home initially that Friday, and you were feeling different, and still not knowledgeable as to whether or not you were positive or negative, were there any symptoms going on with it? When was the next symptom, or when was the next person hit with a symptom? Because you were pretty much the person who brought that in, or are you under the impression that you were the first person?
Well, I started to think maybe it was my sister, because my sister's full of energy, more energy than I'll ever have. And I remember I started thinking, and oh my gosh, you said a couple of days ago you've been feeling tired, but she didn't have a cough at that point.
Wow.
And she didn't have a fever. Now I have this cough, and I don't have a fever. And now my husband has a cough and terrible body aches. And then my mother started getting a very high fever and was tested, and hers was a different test than mine. Mine was a laboratory test where they perform it on you, and it goes way up. My mother's was a rapid test, probably because she's 70. So her test came back in 2 days, and she said,
Wow.
I'm positive. And then I went, oh my gosh, I know for sure that I must be, because we were
Yeah.
And so then
Close proximity, everybody's feeling a little different.
yeah.
So wow, that is something. So now let's move through the process. So everybody's quarantining and everybody's quarantining. How did that look? Was everybody still commingling because everybody was infected? So it was just like, all right, well, let's just pass the butter, pass this, let's sit at the round table, or was everybody isolated?
It was more like, it was very strange. It was more like one day somebody might be stronger than the other and less weak or whatever, and would get up and make soup, or make sure that everybody had a drink, or make sure that you're taking I had a pulse oximeter delivered. I just started using the groceries delivery service Shipt, and I started having these things brought in, and so I felt so afraid, because we all were sick at the same time, and my parents were sick, and so this pulse ox was the only way I could know if I needed to get somebody to a hospital, because the oxygen levels, mine were different, and theirs stayed pretty good. But no, my husband and I share a bed, and we sleep in the same room, and my stepdaughter slept in her room, and but she's also online learning and has questions, and and my sister kind of stayed in a recliner because it was more comfortable for her body. It's impossible to segregate when the whole house is sick. It just is.
Sure. That's very different. But when I was going through COVID, it was just my wife and I, so it was easier for us to go ahead and separate. But yeah. So it sounded like you were able to still try to function within this whole situation as normal as possible. So now, once you had gone through, I guess was it 10 days or so that your place of business had required you to be out, or how did they do that?
10 days, and no symptoms for 48 hours, meaning no cough, no fever, no throwing up, no diarrhea, any of those things. But it's generally a 10-day. They did not require a second test to get a negative. It was just kind of, okay, well, the guidelines are 10 days and symptom-free for 48 hours. So
yes. So after that period, before you're welcome back to go to work, was there a test required, or that was it? Just wait your 10 days, let's see what happens, and trusting that you are reporting the facts and saying, I'm not feeling any symptoms, I'm ready to come back in. Wow.
Right.
That's heavy, because I mean, a lot of people, hey, you can't pay the bills, you can't really handle a household without bringing in some income. So people might make that judgment call, just saying, you know what, I'm going to tough it out and get back in. So for the betterment and for the moving forward of the family. So that's kind of scary. That's very scary. Nothing's mandated for you to have to get a test to go back to work. So now, long hauler, how did that play into what you're going through, and who did anybody tell you were a long hauler, or how do you come up with a long hauler? Because this is my the first time I heard of a long hauler was when we had our conversation. I just thought it was so interesting the way you were telling me the story and everything. Something.
Well, typically, and it's really hard to use the word typically because this is such an atypical thing, but usually around the 2-week mark, people have turned a corner and they're starting to feel more like themselves.
Yes.
And, maybe a couple little things, it takes the body a little while, but when you are, so I was off of work for 3 weeks. I had it in my lungs terribly. And I went back to work for a week and 2 days. And by the beginning of that second week, I was literally in tears. It seemed like my symptoms were getting worse again. And I started to feel like, what's wrong with me? My husband has been back to work. My sister's been back to work. And I am collapsing. Migraines with blurred vision, body aches, the fatigue is unreal, the foggy brain, just a lot of muscle spasms and aches just from doing my daily tasks of mousing. I remember just telling my boss, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't be here. I don't know what's wrong. And she said, you need to see your doctor.
Yeah.
So I got in to see the doctor, and I was just a mess. I was sitting in her office, and she walked in, and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just am not better, and I should be better, and I'm not. And it had been about almost 7 weeks since my first diagnosis, and she said the kindest thing to me, which is, you are not alone. And it's okay that you're not okay. You're a long hauler. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, sometimes we don't understand it yet. We aren't going to understand it for a long time, but sometimes the body is just affected differently. It attacks different parts of the body, and the virus sheds in the body. Some people just have a more difficult time and can be symptomatic for, well, as of right now, all they know is for up to a year. But that's all the science we have on it, really.
Yeah.
And she said, I don't like to say that because I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, I have to live through this because that may not be the case. But she said, we can try a lot of things. And she said, for now, it's too soon for you to be back at work. We're going to take it week by week. We're going to do an extensive lab panel to make sure nothing else is going on. And sure enough, my kidneys were affected. My numbers are low, and it was almost like a sigh of relief because it explained a lot of the swelling and not feeling good, and anxiety and heartbeat problems and blurry vision. I mean, all of it. And she said, with a lot of good hydration and, being careful what you take for pain or anything like that, she said, I believe your kidneys are not so damaged that they can't come back over time.
Yes. So it's not irreversible. You just have to manage and try to, did she prescribe anything, or just give it some time?
No, and I was really glad she didn't prescribe anything, because to me, I would rather have the opportunity to drink more water and clean living and exercise, because in my mind, if your kidneys are filtering, I certainly don't want to. In fact, I took the migraine medication out of the picture to give my kidneys one less thing to filter.
Good.
So
at this point, how do you feel? Feeling-wise?
Well, I still I'm very winded quite easily. I lose my breath quite often. Get real shaky for almost like a drop in blood sugar, but I've eaten. I'm having a real issue with sleeping through the night. That's been a really big symptom. And I'm still getting headaches, but at least I know it took the pressure off of me to hear her say, it's okay that you're not okay.
Yes.
Because I felt like my whole family, even my 70-year-old parents, are okay. What's wrong with me?
Yeah. I spoke with the last guest that I had on. I know it is very important to, I believe, to do follow-ups with your primary physician or with your own doctor, because if you don't, then you're going to kind of just be left out there and you'll be self-diagnosing yourself. And it sounds like a situation where, anxiety plays a part, the whole pandemic would play a part, the mental health aspect of it all and feeling alone, like you said. I know that with COVID, and we spoke, and I was very comfortable, and you said it's very comfortable knowing, or being able to share with somebody who can, want to learn or want to understand about these things. And not only that, but it's a person who can relate. And I think it's almost like forms a cult when you have COVID with the people who had COVID, because then you understand, and it's not just like, you're explaining to somebody who just like, a lot of people, before I had COVID, for example, I take care of myself, run 5 miles, swim, cycle, do everything under the sun. So I didn't think that if I did get it, and I don't have any pre-existing conditions, so I thought, well, if I get it, I'll be able to rid myself of it and press on with life. Well, that wasn't the case. Everybody's case is different. Now we have a new strand coming in, and it's just wow. So I think that it's important that you do partner up with a medical team or somebody in the medical field, a doctor who kind of you through. I had a doctor who gave me a timeline and said, well, okay, you should be fine by this date. If you don't have any symptoms, fine, but at least it was a phone conference. You're not going in, but it's still okay because you have a medical professional on your side guiding you through as your wingman or wingwoman, and I think that's very important. So, it's hopefully you'll be coming out of the woods pretty soon. Are you still drinking plenty of water?
More water than ever before.
Your skin is soft and hair is growing down your back. I'll tell you, I need to drink some more water and see what happens.
Yeah.
Sounds like the right track to me. So, and your family members are all pretty much okay? I know you said your husband is still experiencing some pain and things. Your folks are doing all right?
My mom is doing better than my dad, for sure.
Okay.
He had some issues before COVID that kind of complicated some things. But for the most part, I feel like we're all very lucky that nobody ended up in a hospital, for sure.
Yes.
But these last few weeks, I lost sight of that, and I was starting to really feel not so lucky because I felt like emotionally it was a marathon I have never ran before.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we're not out of the woods yet, so make sure that you're moving forward. You mask up. I know that like the antibodies do pick up after a while. You haven't quite reached that point yet because you haven't experienced a negative test yet. So I want to wish you all the best. I thank you so much for sharing. And now I think we have a good understanding, a better understanding of what a long hauler is. I think that, we definitely need to prepare ourselves and brace ourselves. I know a lot of people are taking the vaccine. How do you feel about the vaccine?
I'm so mixed. On one hand, the thought of getting COVID again scares me to no end. And on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, is my immune system strong enough to not have an adverse reaction to the vaccine? I'm not sure. I think I almost need to see more people get it, but I will be taking every precaution, masking, and keep doing what I've been doing. You can't live in absolute fear, or else it absolutely rules your life. But you have to be so cautious,
Absolutely. And it boils down to results when it comes to the vaccine. We want to see some results. We want to see some data, and we just don't have it yet. But there are some major figures that are going out there taking it, and I think that's really leadership at its best, because we don't know, they don't know what the repercussions will be, and I think that that's a real stand-up position that they're taking. But again, it comes down to choice, and also how they're going to go ahead and determine who's the essential worker, and go through the layers and things of people who are necessary. And from my understanding, they're mad. We'll see how it plays out. I do want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to wish you and your family a happy holiday.
You as well.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll see you on the YouTube channel.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you so much for your support. Take care. God bless you and your family, Shannon.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. So I'd like to welcome my next guest. And my next guest is Kristina Ferrari. And she is here helping us out with mental health. And she has a lot more to say. She has a long title, so I don't want to go through the title. I'm going to let her introduce herself to you. But I just want to say first, we're segueing in after having our first guest, and her name was Shannon, and she came on and gave us some information on what a long hauler is. And folks, this was my first time actually experiencing or learning the definition of a long hauler. And from my understanding, or now our understanding, a long hauler is somebody who's been through COVID, contracted the virus, and still is going through the symptoms of the virus with no end in sight. But she is working along with her physician, who's guiding her through and kind of, working through some things. She's actually walked away with COVID, still in her system, and now she's having issues with her kidneys. So I know that things happen, and I know that when I had COVID, my wife had COVID, it was very difficult because it was a brand new norm, first of all, dealing with the pandemic, and then having, symptoms and going through things that we could just treat through like household medications and stuff like that, but we really didn't know what this virus was all about. It kind of got to us mentally. And so now I have a mental health specialist on, and so she's going to introduce herself. And again, this is Kristina, everybody. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, Tommy, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm Kristina Ferrari, no relation, unfortunately, to the car company, or that I know of at least. I'm a psychotherapist. I have a private practice outside of Philadelphia. And yeah, I mean, since March, I've been working virtually, similarly to how we're doing it now. And I have to say that COVID is probably the main topic of conversation for most people, for sure. And, I was sharing with you when we spoke earlier that there's this notion of we're having this collective experience, and in many ways we are, but we're also having individual experiences of our collective experience, which I'm sure you've, kind of seen a lot of as you've been talking to people, and it can be really difficult to navigate in myriad ways. So anxiety for sure is something that comes up for people. Fear of getting it, fear of somebody else getting it, fear of finances, fear of anxiety around relationships, being too close, being too far. I mean, you name it, COVID is impacting it.
Absolutely. So, prior to the pandemic, was there a distinct contrast between pre-COVID and then, now going through COVID with regard to the population of people that were coming into your services?
So I do a lot of trauma work and I do a lot of relationship work. Those are sort of the two main areas where I focus. And COVID is, kind of hits both of those places particularly hard. In the sense of, if people have had traumatic histories, they tend to experience more anxiety, more depression, PTSD-like symptoms. And when the world is kind of all of a sudden upended, that can be really triggering for a lot of people. Similarly, in relationships, navigating, things like, how do we both work in a small apartment with two kids that used to be in school, but now they're not? Or, you used to travel for work and our relationship was one thing and all of a sudden you're home all the time and that's a totally different, environment. So I wouldn't say that I'm seeing necessarily different kinds of people, but certainly everyone that I do see has been impacted by COVID in some way.
in some way. Sure, sure. Now you're in Philadelphia. Are there a lot of changes going on in Philly right now?
So actually, just before we got on, I got a text alert that Philadelphia has extended the current protocol, which includes no indoor dining at all, no gyms, until January 15th. I expect that will probably be extended again. So it's quite cold here. It snowed the other day, and we're all sitting outside bundled up in our restaurants, and
Yeah.
masks are required everywhere. Most schools, with the exception of Catholic or Jewish schools that have a religious orientation, are virtual only, private and public. So I think my sons have been on campus maybe a week total since last March, very, very sporadically. So we're taking it pretty seriously here.
Yeah, yeah. And so you said all of your patients are virtual right now. So do you go into an office, or do you just kind of, you're home and you do everything from home?
I've chosen to stay home. You're actually in my home office right now. This is where I see
Great,
clients.
yeah.
This is it. This is my house. I do still have my office, and I could see clients virtually there. But, one of as much as there's been so many, sort of negatives associated with COVID, there have been some upsides. I know for me, I've got 2 teenage boys who are home where they wouldn't be normally, and I can work from home. So I have an opportunity to spend time with them in between seeing my patients, and I've tried to find the upside in a lot of downside, which is 2 teenage boys who kind of want to hang out with their mom sometimes, which is sort of nice.
Yeah. So I would imagine that even the kids, students and things are experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression maybe, and things of that nature, where just everything's new.
Absolutely. There's, first off, like you said, there's just sort of the adjustment to it all. And I think depending on the age of the kids, different things are coming up. For younger kids, they're not acclimated, hopefully, to sitting in front of a screen for extended periods of time. I have patients whose children are in kindergarten and they're required to sit for 6 hours a day in front of a screen, which is just not okay for a 6-year-old to do.
That's right, sure.
Yeah, so that's creating a whole bunch of problems. Yeah, mom's home, but if she's working and she has to sit in front of the computer with the kid all day long. So for younger kids, there's just been this sort of attention span issue. For older kids like mine, it's interesting because there's so much focus, I think, from a mental health perspective on social media and on kids gaming and spending time in front of a screen. And I think what we've really realized through this is kids actually long for connection. They're longing for that interaction, that social engagement. And it's particularly hard on the older kids who, don't have that at all. It's interesting to hear my sons be like, I'm desperate to go to school. They get upset every time it's extended again. But they're really, they're missing milestones too. I've got kids who would be dating and they're not because they can't see anybody, or they would be working on their physical being, gyms are closed. So I think, it's an opportunity to be creative, and there's nice things about being able to engage with them, but older kids, and they're missing milestones like graduations and, and proms and things that we sort of take for granted as hallmarks of I'm moving to this next thing. Or freshman year in college, but you're all sitting in your dorm all the time. So you're not really getting the total experience. And it's really weighing on them. A lot of depression and anxiety and just sort of frustration, I think, with like, when is this going to end?
Yes. And then you talk about milestones and also these benchmarks of the year, such as these holidays that we're being faced with. Is this a kind of a peak time? Do you find that people are, in need of some sort of support because we have the holidays and things are so different now?
Yeah, well, what we say in therapy is like January is our biggest month of the year. So we typically this is one of my slower months. It hasn't been true this month, and I think that COVID is the reason that that's so. But usually it's like people get through the holidays and then they realize all the crazy crap that happened with their family, et cetera, and then they come to therapy in January to process it all. So usually when you wait until about January 3rd, the calls start coming in. But that being said, so there's all of the stuff, all of the stresses and anxieties. As much as, holidays are lovely and a time of family and connection, they can be really difficult for some people. And now you've just added an additional layer on. I can't be with my family because I can't risk, exposing my grandmother, or, I'm too far to travel, even if I go in, I have to quarantine, so I can't work. It's like all of these additional stressors that are overlaid upon something that's either already stressful or an opportunity to really feel connected and safe and comfortable with our family. And now I don't get to do that. And the traditions we have that are upended in whatever way, it's like, what are we doing this year? Similarly with Thanksgiving, it's like most people I talk to is sort of like, oh, we just treated it like any other day, because what are you going to do?
Yes. Yes.
But there's grieving. What I encourage people from a perspective of navigating their mental health is to see this as real loss and to grieve it, because grief is a healthy emotion. It's a process of moving through something to someplace else, and there's a lot of sadness and fear and anxiety, etc. in grief. There often is, but it gets you someplace. It's a loss.
It certainly does. I'll tell you, I as I told you earlier, I had lost my mom actually last month on the 29th, and through COVID, I seem to have found a balance and really a way of acceptance, with life in the process, and gratefulness with each day, because it's just like the clock slowed down and you spend so much time with yourself and with your mate. It's either going to make or break. And, and I guess I got so introspective with myself that it kind of put the landing gears down for me, so that whatever comes at me now, I have a way of processing, or I've gone through, it might've been pre-processing. So now it's just to the point of, okay, acceptance and the ability to kind of move through. It's strange, but it's a weird connection that's been made within myself, through this process of COVID. And I'm just hoping that it doesn't crash and I bottom out during the holidays. But so far it seems like I have somewhat of a handle on things, so I can identify with what you're saying.
Oh, that's so great to hear that. And also, give yourself some space to be fluid, that, kind of, that some days may be more challenging than others, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're sliding into something.
Right.
But yeah, what a lovely benefit of a really terrible thing.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So what would you have? Do you have any advice or any tips for mental health to kind of keep ourselves together on a day-to-day?
I think a few things that have been helpful for me personally, to really create, as opposed to routine, I like to create rituals. I think that there's just something that's sort of sweet and lovely about a ritual versus a routine that sort of maybe has some monotony built into it, or some expectation of something I have to do versus something I get to do. So I try to find simple pleasures. I wake up before everyone else in the house, and I, instead of using my Keurig, I've been making French press every day and being really mindful with how I do things. And, instead of just doing my meditation, I light a fire. So I'm trying to find sweet, simple moments of making sure that, because I am limited in some way in terms of what I can and can't do, within the context of what I can do, finding new options there, creating rituals, caring for myself, in ways that I might not have before, cooking or, music, things like that. And I also think it's so important to maintain our connections. We struggle with that probably anyway, because our lives have gotten so busy, and, we'll always oh yeah, I'll call my friend later, or we'll get together at some point. And I know that we're probably all sick of staring at, ourselves on video screens, and also do it anyway. Because once you're in that conversation with your friend, you're the part of the connection of, sharing an experience with someone, maybe related to COVID, maybe not, maybe it's an opportunity to not talk about it at all and just exchange energy. But as humans, we're hardwired for connection, and if we lose that, our mental health really suffers as a result of it. So fantastic. I would also say externalizing your internal experience. I think that's a hallmark of all mentally healthy well-beings, is that just getting out whatever's in, saying what's true for you, expressing how you feel, just the process of externalizing it can be cathartic and therapeutic. Even if, no one necessarily is going to fix the problem, but they can sit with you in the difficult space.
Yes. Well, this has been super. I thank you so much for your time. We have some takeaways that you had given us. I feel like Christmas came early with Kristina and the takeaways that we got. So thank you very much. At short notice, came in here like the true superhero. So we definitely appreciate you. You're actually our first mental health specialist and first professional in the healthcare field to come on the show. I just wanted to kind of build it up and let people know what's out there and the different nuances of this virus, and let them know that there is a fear factor involved, but also that we have professionals out there at the same time working feverishly at trying to keep and maintain some sort of balance while we get through this. And I wish you a wonderful holiday, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Quite welcome. Thank you. Same to you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Okay, folks, well, we're getting ready to close out this episode, another episode of the Tommy Williams Show. I think we had a very impactful evening with the show. We had Shannon come on. Shannon was a long hauler, and she shared a lot of information on how she's making it through COVID. She still has a negative test going on, and she hasn't positive, and she hasn't tested negative yet. She's also encountering some post conditions. She's having problems with her kidney, and we want to make sure we send some prayers up for Shannon and her family as she tries to defeat COVID and get herself back on track. And a wonderful holiday to Shannon. Also, we had Kristina on, and Kristina came in with a lot of support for us, shared what's going on in the mental health field and how things have kind of shifted during the pandemic. She also gave us some takeaways, folks, and I think the most important thing she said that we as humans are hardwired for connections, and we're in need of connections. So it's very important that if you have friends and family that you could reach out to, you want to make sure you maintain those relationships, because it's very important. We want to try to be, from what I understood, as normal as possible, especially when it comes down to the communication aspect. Kids are suffering now without being in school in a normal environment. Marriages are suffering because we're stuck at home and have to just work with the quarantining and follow the guidelines. And so it's very important that we communicate. And also, another takeaway was to take time out for rituals and do some things that are kind of routine. And so like Kristina had said, she was doing things with the Keurig in the morning, and then she was sitting by the fire. And so that's something that you want to do. You want to come up with some different routines. Maybe some things are just exciting and something that you look forward to doing each day, whether it's the morning, evening, or afternoon, and just something that you just feel is your own. So I encourage you all to definitely take a good look at this program, look at the takeaways, and make sure you all stay masked up. Have a wonderful holiday, and thank you so much for watching the Tommy Williams Show, and take care, and God bless you. Happy holidays.
Now, glutathione is a big word, but it's the body's own master antioxidant. So it's a scavenger for free radicals, for bacteria, and what's relevant now, viruses. This is new to the marketplace. There's no other product on the market that has the ingredient NACET.
And basically NACET increases the production of that glutathione that is in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system and keep it strong.
Elevated sense of well-being. Supports muscle strength and endurance.
Cognitive function. Powerful liver support.
Energy. Helps blood sugar regulation. Superior bioavailability of key ingredients.
One of your best defenses against COVID is a strong immune system. Taking GSH Plus as a daily supplement does all that. And now we have the product out on the marketplace.